Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The conductor was Mario Stravinsky, the production and choreography were done by Nacho Duato, the sets and costumes were done by Jérôme Kaplan, the lights were handled by Brad Fields, and the assistant directors were Hentian Doda and Thomas Klein. Now if you know me based on a video that I made 2 years ago, where I talked about 3 of my most favorite productions of Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker, you will already know that The Nutcracker is one of my most favorite ballets of all time. In fact, this ballet has a very special place in my heart because ever since I was a little boy, I used to dance as one of the children, one time when I was a 5-year-old and another time when I was a 9-year-old, and it was a really nice memory for me. And as I stated before, this ballet has a very, very special place in my heart, mostly due to the story, the music, and all the characters that embody this entire story. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about the production. Much like its predecessor with the Baryshnikov and Kirkland production, it all starts out with a narrative done by Helmut Krauss, offensichtlich auf Deutsch. Now, it really serves the story wonderfully, and it's basically quite a callback to the opening narration done with the TV production starring Baryshnikov and Gelsey Kirkland. It then leads on to the main action where we are then treated to a really nice looking hall, and I have to say that the set designs overall for the first scene were really good. It's not too flashy, nor is it too dull. It was just right. It was quite intricate in its own special way, and it was just quite gorgeous to look at. The same thing I can say about the costumes, whether it be from the first half or the second act. They were absolutely gorgeous all throughout. And before we transition to the second act, we then see a whole cascade of stars in a really, really dark night sky to show that Clara and her Nutcracker prince are like dancing among the stars in the sky before they land on the snowy ground. And I thought it looked rather mesmerizing. And it was just completely gorgeous to look at, especially when we go to the Kingdom of Sweets, where it does feel like it's still Clara's dream, but the Kingdom of Sweets isn't really fully fleshed out until we transition to the Waltz of the Flowers, which I thought was rather interesting. But there were some caveats to be found in this particular production, and it's mostly in terms of some of the cuts made during some of the musical parts. Yes, what I've noticed is that there were some cuts, including cutting out Mother Gigon's and her little doll scene, and I always looked forward to that particular scene every time I think about the Nutcracker. But at least they still managed to keep in the other dances like the Arabian Coffee, which was missing from the Baryshnikov and Kirkland production. And it's still a very gorgeous production to look at overall. And I really love that scene where the Nutcracker doll then transforms into a human-sized prince with Clara running around the stage as her Nutcracker doll grows bigger and bigger in size until it reaches the height of a human male, which I thought was rather interesting as it was able to show the urgency of the scene. And when the Nutcracker Prince gets turned into a full-fledged human, he still makes a little bit of those doll movements, but then when he completely turns into human, it's completely alive. His movements are completely alive and completely lifelike. So overall, despite some cuts in the music, the production is still really gorgeous to look at, with interesting and intricate designs, really gorgeous costumes, and an overall atmosphere that really makes this production come alive. And now we get to the dancers, starting off with Yana Dolenko as Clara, and I thought she was just so fabulous. She has a very darling stage presence, and she was able to make Clara come alive with her youthfulness, her vivacity, and her overall charm. She was so playful in the first act, which is no surprise because Clara is supposed to be a very young teenager between the ages of 13 to 15, and she was able to portray that girlishness really, really convincingly, and she was able to bring out that youthfulness, vivacity, and her chemistry with tonight's Nutcracker Prince, Marianne Valta, was so palpable. You could really feel the overall tension that these two have, and their chemistry was absolutely superb, and their technical work was of the highest order. Speaking of Marian Valta, he was another great performer, and he did the role of the Nutcracker Prince. He was very elegant, very charming, and he was just so inhabited in the role. He was dashing, he was graceful, he was quite heroic, but he still maintained that youthfulness and that spry nature which he managed to bring out with such pure abandon. And he was just absolutely amazing, and he danced the role wonderfully. I also loved his pas de deux with Yana Dolenko's Clara, as their chemistry, as I mentioned before, was very palpable. Ryszard Yulbarisov's Drosselmeyer was just so handsomely done. His movements were very spry. His overall manner on stage just screams hints of swagger, but also a sense of masculinity and charm. And he was a total gazelle on stage. He was able to make Drosselmeyer come alive in terms of his overall youthfulness, and he has a very spry and handsome stage presence. Dominic Whitbrook's Fritz does have that bratty half-pint attitude, and he was able to portray this role with a lot of mischief, and he was just such a darling on stage. However, if you know my tastes, I actually prefer a young woman to portray the role of Fritz, since I really expect this role to be an entravesti part. But all tastes aside, Dominic Whitbrook does a very fine job with embodying Fritz and giving him his signature bratty half-pint attitude, and he really knows how to make Fritz a very fun-loving yet mischievous character. The dancing done by Alexander Shpak's Pierrot, Krasina Pavlova's Colombina, and Arshak Galumyan's Moore was absolutely well done. These three dancers were absolutely gorgeous, and they were able to portray their roles wonderfully. Michael Banzhaf and Elena Pris were absolutely wonderful as the Stahlbaums. They danced wonderfully, and they were absolutely gorgeous on stage. Sarah Mestrovich and Cameron Hunter had excellent chemistry as the Spanish Chocolate. Elisa Carrillo Cabrera, Joaquin Crespo Lopez, and Dominic Whitbrook had amazing chemistry as the Arabian dancers. And what I also noticed about their scene is that there is also a snake that enters on stage slithering across, a la Die Zauberflöte's serpent in the first act, which I found really interesting. Marina Cano, Maria Bompuli, Vladislav Marinov, and Wei Wang were really charming Chinese tea dancers. Alexander Akulov, Arshak Galumyan, Konstantin Lorenz, and Alexia Orlenko were so robust as the Russian Trepak. Krasina Pavlova and Shahar Dori were really charming as the French Mirlitoins, and the ensemble dancing in general was just so wonderful all throughout. Whether it be from the children to the snowflakes to the waltz of the flowers, everyone did fabulously all throughout. So I'm not going to mince words here. The dancing, the choreography, the performers were absolutely top tier. And the conducting done by Mario Stravinsky was quite well done. There were moments where I seemed to notice that some of the tempi were quite intermittent. Sometimes they were a little bit too slow for my tastes. Sometimes they were a little bit too fast for my tastes. And there were other times where it was okay, but there was just not a lot of harmony to be found. But it's still a very fine mastery of the text, but I would have loved to have a little bit more congruency and a little bit more cohesion. But despite that, it's still a very fine job that he did with the orchestra and especially the all-girls chorus. So overall, this was definitely a very solid Nutcracker. And for those of you who have seen this particular production, what did you think of it? Did you really like it? Did you not care for it too much? Were you in the middle of it? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow where I review Blood Freak. So until then, have a great evening, everybody.